Now, if we look at the released schedules, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 have all released schedules with dates. The ACC has its schedule release coming next Monday, and shameless plug here, we will do an ACC schedule release at 7 p.m. Eastern Time live on all the ACC channels, because that's when they're going to release the schedule. So we'll break down what is going to be a new and revised ACC format with no divisions and with permanent rivals and all of that. So a different take on the ACC scheduling coming up here in 23. But as Jason outlines, the Big 12 still has yet to release its schedule. Sure, there's a different dynamic there that may be delaying them with the 4 new schools coming in and the 2 that are leaving most likely still being around. So they've got a 14 team league to deal with this year. And so obviously not everyone's going to play everyone, as has been the case for quite a long time in the Big 12 with 10 teams playing 9 conference games.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting thing to discuss as we've mentioned, and I know there's a lot of discussion about since Oklahoma and Oklahoma State looks like that rivalry is not necessarily going to be renewed on a regular basis, would that be something that would Oklahoma and Oklahoma State continue to play each other for this year, or if it happened to be 2 years? So I think that's part of the equation. That's part of the intrigue. I know that me and you both, I mean, as intrigued as I am and excited I am to see Oklahoma compete in the SEC, there's still some intrigue in this, in this Big 12, for a season as well. So yeah, I think and that's why I kind of mentioned that you have to think that the decisions either have already been made, and they're obviously they're just not made public at some point if it's 2023, because there's a lot of scheduling considerations and a lot of other things that need to happen. So it'll be interesting to watch for sure.
I think that the Big 12 schedule release is by far the most interesting and intriguing, with the 4 new additions. And then again, with the existing teams, Oklahoma and Texas, and just to see if there are any obvious disadvantages that the Big 12 wants to place on Oklahoma and Texas in regards to scheduling, road schedules, difficult trips back to back. For example, Oklahoma having to go to Orlando to play Central Florida, and then the next week have to travel to BYU.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything obvious like that, and even if there's not, just the intrigue, at least that I have, I don't know where everybody else stands on this, just to see some fresh matchups. And I don't know how much the Big 12 is going to integrate the 4 new schools into Oklahoma and Texas's schedules. Maybe they will try to separate them as much as possible. I would find it more interesting if they played as much as possible, because we're not going to get to see Texas go to Orlando to play UCF, or Oklahoma go to Cincinnati and play in the future. So I'm interested to see those matchups. I'm interested also, from a Big 12 perspective going forward, in terms of conference rivalries and what the conference wants to do with establishing rivalries. Houston's obviously right in the middle of it. They have a long-standing tradition going way back to the Southwest Conference days with a number of these schools like Baylor and TCU. So to see if that's really a huge emphasis in Houston's schedule to make sure that they're playing everybody in the state of Texas to reestablish those rivalries. Also, and I know that they play a lot of those schools on a regular basis. They've played Texas Tech, for example, the last 2 years, home and home. then the other geographical connection for me is West Virginia's on an island by itself in the Big 12 right now. They're just
Mhm,
sitting out there, and it's got to be to a disadvantage from a recruiting standpoint,
mhm.
because if you play high school football in Oklahoma, and let's say you're not good enough or you get bypassed by Oklahoma, but you can play for Oklahoma State, or even if Oklahoma State doesn't want you, there's a number of options to stay within the region and still come home or near your family and friends to play. You're in the region. So you've got a number of options. And so you would think that the spillover between states is fairly common, as opposed to if you're in the state of West Virginia and you want to play big time college football, okay, you're either have it set on you want to play at West Virginia. But if you're in Pennsylvania or Maryland or Virginia in a neighboring state, what's your incentive to go play at West Virginia and play all your games in Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma? So you're going to take, most likely, if that's important to you, and let's say you're that second or third tier prospect, you're a high 3-star, you're a top 3 to 500 player, something in that range, where you're not going to Alabama or Clemson, but you're going to, you're looking at Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, Rutgers, those kind of schools. Well, you're not going to go to West Virginia because you're not going to get to play in your area. But if you go to Virginia, well, then you can play all these close proximity
Right.
schools that your family and friends can attend. So I would just think, as it stands right now, that's a huge disadvantage for West Virginia. But now they've got Cincinnati. So I would think that maybe the Big 12 is going to do something close to what we've seen in other conferences, i.e., Mizzou leaves the Big 12, comes to the SEC, and they automatically pin Missouri with Arkansas to make that a last game of the season rivalry. Rutgers and Maryland in the Big 10, they joined. Just a number of examples like that you see across college football, that they would try to, because of the close proximity, pair Cincinnati and West Virginia together as a rivalry.
Yeah, no, I think West Virginia probably has to be the happiest of anyone. To your point about this Big 12 expansion, particularly in the geographic areas that they've expanded to, just because, I mean, yes, it's absolutely, I think, is a recruiting impact to West Virginia, based on where they play. But I think also, the travel is something that I'm sure is continues to be a negative. And I think for football, it's a little bit different. It's only you only have what, 5, 6 road games a year, but at the same time, when you have those games, not even talking about if they have any road non-conference games, but when you go to the conference, like they're traveling well further of a distance than any other of the Big 12 schools. So I think that's something that has to be taxing, but not to, like I said, not specifically to football. When you talk about these other sports as well, that the travel is tough. So I think that continues to be a challenge both on the recruiting side and the just kind of the day-to-day grind of the athletes, and having that big of a travel disparity in terms of how far that they have to go. Obviously other schools have to go to Morgantown, but it's a one trip a year as opposed to 5, 6 trips a year, to to have to do that. So I think all things considered, with particularly Cincinnati, I think it would certainly, I think the Big 12 would have to throw West Virginia a little bit of a bone here in terms of what that understanding, what their travel schedule has looked like over the few years. But even more, obviously, even more specifically with, um, with now, having the geography a little bit more balanced to a certain degree, would be able to help West Virginia without a doubt.